Well, hey everyone, my name is Nathan Jones, and if you're new here, welcome. I like to talk about all things movies, specifically Blu-rays, and it's cold outside and it's snowing a lot. And it's like negative 24 degrees Celsius outside where I'm at here in Missouri. In fact, there's been a cold front and a huge snowstorm all the way up through the Midwest, up into Canada, which is typical of Canada because they get snow. But wherever you're at, if you're watching this, I hope you get snowed in. If you don't get snow at all, that's perfectly fine too. We have unfortunately been feeling isolated anyway, but today I wanted to bring to you some recommendations if you potentially would have been snowed in. And I remember as a kid growing up loving snow days. I love snow days, and I remember getting school canceled and also being able to just see my friends and do ridiculous things. If the power was out, we'd go outside, maybe jump on a frozen trampoline, slip and fall down the stairs, sled, things like that. If it was inside, we'd play board games, video games, if the power was on, right? Or watch a movie. That's what we would be doing. And so I had a really good time as a kid when snow actually happened, but it's been a long time since snow has actually been around here and this much snow. So it's got me excited. In fact, I even looked at my shelf and I picked up this, Jeremiah Johnson. This is actually something I want to watch today. It's been a long time since I've seen this movie, but it got me thinking of other films that you could potentially watch if you were snowed in. And so I started looking around my collection, and I started thinking of some stuff that maybe would be like maybe on the very nose of like, okay, obviously this is snow. You could talk about Christmas films like Black Christmas, right? This is like a Christmas horror film that you could watch. You could watch something like that, or you could watch A Crimson Peak. Another horror film, but not so Christmassy. It's just all centered around snow. There's like snow, and it's just utterly beautiful. Or there's even films that are maybe not so on the nose that you would think like, why would I want to watch that? And some associations that personally I would have with wanting to watch something that if I was like isolated or it was a snow day, I'd want to watch something like this, and I would be like The Fountain, where there's some seasonal things going on in this film in particular, but it's not necessarily a snow day film. It's not a snowed in film. But yeah, it got me thinking. I wanted to think of half of this list, 5 and 5, so 10 films that I would recommend if you were snowed in. And so let's just jump right into the films themselves. And yeah, let's start off with the ones that are pretty much on the nose. All right, so the first film is one that I've talked about so many times. From 1982, it's one of my favorite horror films of all time. You probably already know what this is. It's John Carpenter's The Thing. This movie is just absolutely perfect. This is the Scream Factory edition, the 2-disc edition. I would love the Arrow limited edition someday, but I love this film. It's a perfect film. The Ennio Morricone score, John Carpenter's direction, I think that Kurt Russell's performance and everybody's performance, the practical effects in this film, the isolation, everything about it is just terrifying. But it's also covered with snow, and everyone's just like, that's all that's happening around them is they're isolated away from the world and this horrific, thing that's going on, in the film itself. And I absolutely love it. And yeah, this is one of the most obvious films to watch as you're snowed in. And I think this is just a perfect film, and I'm pretty sure most of you have already seen this film, so I probably don't have much to add. But if you haven't seen this movie, do yourself a favor and check out this horror masterpiece, because it's definitely one of the best films ever made. All right, so let's actually move on to another film that is all about isolation and all about some bad company, if you would. And the film that I'm talking about today is The Hateful Eight. It's one of Quentin Tarantino's films that I don't feel like is talked about that often. It's one of my favorite films from him, and I know I just mentioned Ennio Morricone and Kurt Russell both. They're both in this film as well, or no, Ennio Morricone scores in this film. Kurt Russell plays in this film as well. But this film, just like any Tarantino film, is stacked. We got Bruce Dern, Michael Madsen, Tim Roth, Demian Bichir, Walter Goggins, Jennifer Jason Leigh. We have Kurt Russell, I just said, Sam Jackson, Channing Tatum. There's so many people in this film, and it's just absolutely lovely. Lovely in the sense that it's really brutal when it comes to the nature outside, and also the human nature of distrust and not really understanding where somebody lies, or maybe somebody is just not really telling the truth. And I really, really love this particular film because it's almost like a stage play. It's like acting just all in one location and just back and forth dialogue. And that's one of the things I love about films like this, is that isolation, and you're like set in one setting, and there's just this mystery unravels, and everything is just kind of coming together. And that's what Hateful Eight is. And it's a 3-hour adventure. If you haven't seen this one, I think it's on Netflix, and I think the extended edition's on Netflix. It's a long one, but I have this normal Blu-ray, and I absolutely love this movie, and I think it deserves a lot more attention. So let's actually move on from here to 1996, to a film from the Coen brothers. All right, so this one should be obvious. It's another Northern film. This time we're talking about Arby's, how much they love Arby's. I love Frances McDormand in Fargo. This is a really, really lovely movie. Well, lovely might not be the best adjective. It's a strange one. It's one of those films that, like, it's based on, you know, true events or something crazy like this has happened in the past. In fact, this even spawned a TV show, an anthology TV show, and it's absolutely fantastic too. Definitely check that television show out. The first 3 seasons, I believe. There's only 3. Don't quote me on that, but the first season, it just knocked it out of the park. The second season's also just amazing. But anyway, the movie, 1996. This is just, I remember watching this movie years and years ago, maybe 15 or so years ago when I was a kid, in my teenage years. I remember watching this and not really understanding it and not really getting it. And this wasn't super flashy or anything. It was, you know, a little bit more plot driven, a lot more like what the hell's going on in this movie. And, you know, a few years ago, well, not a few years ago, man, time is so weird. I would say 10 years ago or something like that is when it really clicked with me. And then I started loving this movie and watched it. I've seen it ever since then, plenty and plenty of times. In fact, the last time I watched this movie was in the theater. I watched it at the Alamo Drafthouse here in my local cinema, and I had a really fantastic time. In fact, nothing beats that experience when I watched this movie in theaters. And it's just, like I said, it's a strange one. It's one of those Coen Brother films that is definitely in the like top tier, I suppose, if you rank their films. It's a fun one. It's a fun film with a lot of bizarre scenarios and situations, and it's got great acting. Frances McDormand, Steve Buscemi, just to name a few people in this film. It's a wonderful film, and I'm sure many of you have already seen it, but do yourself a favor and watch Fargo and let the mystery unravel. All right, so next we're going to move on to a film that came out in 2010. So this is actually early for Jennifer Lawrence, and this is one of her earlier roles. And this is a film that is actually trying to represent a little bit of the area that I'm around in Missouri. In fact, it's called Winter's Bone. And Winter's Bone is a really tough movie to watch. It's a movie about addiction, family as well, and a film that really tries to, there's also a mystery that is unraveled. Jennifer Lawrence is trying to find what happened to her dad. It's a crazy movie. It's laced with a lot of drugs and a population that's really not covered terribly too much in the Ozarks woods, where I'm from. And this is a very interesting film. Like I said, it's very harrowing. It's a really great one, though. It's a really great thriller with a lot of crazy things and twists and turns. And it's a really early performance by Jennifer Lawrence, and I would recommend this movie. So yeah, I know it went from the fun and zany Fargo to something like this. So if you're feeling like, you know, the isolation of winter and you're feeling like you might want to watch something a little bit more serious, I would recommend Winter's Bone. It's a great film, but it definitely is a chiller. So yeah, so let's move on from there to the last film that I think would be pretty much on the nose, and it's a Western. All right, so we're moving on to 1971 to a Robert Altman film, and I actually watched this for the first time last year, probably around this time, which is actually nice. I watched McCabe and Mrs. Miller, Warren Beatty and Julie Christie. This movie is great. I love this movie, and it's all centered in this Pacific Northwest town, and it's isolated in winter, and it's just like this mining and like lodger town, and nobody trusts anybody. And you know, Warren Beatty comes to town and just pretty much tries to take you know, advantage of some of the townsfolk, and some dire consequences happen. But Julie Christie is also in this movie. It's a really fantastic movie, and Robert Altman is somebody I explored last year, and so my memory is relatively fresh on it, but I just really, really enjoyed this film in particular. There's a really, really fantastic score in this movie, Leonard Cohen. And it's just, it's one of those films that, like, you know, the scenery, the backdrop, the music, the acting, all of it comes and fits perfectly. And this is definitely a movie I would want to watch if I was snowed in. And it's one of those films that you can feel everything that's going on in the movie. And it's a beautiful one. It's also really gross and gritty and dirty. Like it's mud mixed with snow, you know, and so you see all of that. It's a lot of brown and white, I guess, going on with this particular film. And Robert Altman shot it in a really, really unique way. And so I highly recommend this movie. This is actually from the Criterion. I don't know if it's on the Criterion channel, but this is definitely a movie I would watch during a time if I was snowed in. So let's actually move on from here to some films that maybe are not as on the nose about being snowed in. Some of them are, a little bit. But these are some other films that I would recommend going into a snow day where you're snowed in. So let's actually start off with a movie that's maybe a transition piece between the obvious and the not so obvious. So moving away from the Western, we're going to a 2008 film, a Swedish film, that I really, really love, and it's actually been a while since I've seen it, unfortunately, but it's a really great coming-of-age horror film, romance too, it's like all that. Let the Right One In. So this is the original Swedish version. There's an American version that I think is called Let Me In, maybe. I haven't seen that one. But Let the Right One In, really fantastic film. It's about a girl and a boy, and they're really young. Well, the girl is a vampire. And the vampire, she lives next door to this kid who is kind of feeling the isolation of his family, and nobody's really his friend. And so he meets her, which is like more or less a new neighbor of his, and she's got a dark secret, obviously. And this is a really, really fantastic film. Obviously, it's all about isolation. Not just in the sense of the scenery and the environment, but it's also about the isolation of not feeling loved or, you know, being a part of something. And it just happens to have a horror element too, and I absolutely love that. And so if you haven't seen Let the Right One In, I would highly recommend it. It's a really great film. This is Blu-ray from Magnet. Certainly watch this one if you haven't seen it, and yeah, don't be scared of subtitles either. I don't know if I've mentioned that before, but let's move on from here to a film that is definitely not so obvious on a day like this where it's covered in snow. That film that I'm talking about right now is Loving Vincent. So this is definitely a film that has nothing to do with snow. In fact, it's about Vincent van Gogh. And it's a really creative film, and I believe I've talked about this in the past, maybe on my channel. But I saw this 3 or 4 years ago. I think 2017 is when this came out. And I remember watching this in theaters and was just blown away by it. The reason I picked this film for a snowed-in day is creativity. And this is a very creative film. Obviously, it's about the life of Vincent van Gogh. It's a little bit fictionalized, a little bit dramatized, but the way that this is presented is like it's painting. Each and every still and scene in this film is done through a filter of paint, and it had over 100 painters, I believe, who worked on this film. So it's just like it's a passion, it's a love of the medium, and it's a really unique way to make a film. And it's almost like, you know, we're flipping through pages and it's like seeing a character do something, some kind of action like a jump rope or, you know, throwing a frisbee or a basketball. It's like that, but it's done in a painting form where it's like almost these 100 artists utilized the same kind of style that Van Gogh would, and used it as like a biography of like his last days. And it's just really, really fantastic. And, you know, the reason I picked this, like I said, is creativity. So on a day like this, if you were snowed in, you'd be creative and thinking about the things like to kind of pass your time. You would have time for yourself. Hopefully you can do something in a creative endeavor, maybe make a puzzle, maybe write, read, create something, even paint if you would. So I wanted to choose something that wasn't so on the nose with being snowed in, and I think Loving Vincent would be a great representation of what that would look like. So if you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor. It's fantastic. It's a really great movie, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. So let's move on from here to a silent film from the 20s. Now we're going to move on to a silent film from 1924 from F.W. Murnau, talking about The Last Laugh. Now I watched this for the first time I guess last year with my roommate, and I just absolutely love this movie. It's one of those movies that Has a lot of experimentation in the camera work and the design, but it's centered around this man right here, who is Jennings, and he is a doorman at a hotel. And the reason I thought of this movie is just because of the way that the camera works, and also the environment that is utilized in this film. It's very dreamlike. It's very snowy, if you would. At least in my mind, it's like almost like this weird fog that happens in this film. And it's just, I don't know, it's like a redemption story, and seeing the troubles that Jennings has to go through just to be a doorman, and also something else other than that. But that's all I really want to give away with this one, because if anyone, I don't know how many people have seen this movie, but this is the Kino Lorber right here release on Blu-ray. I really absolutely love this film, and it even has a score from 2017 from the Berkeley Silent Film Orchestra, Sheldon Merowitz being the artistic director. And then there's the original 1924 score by Giuseppe Becca, orchestrated by Detlev Glanert. I hope I said that correctly, but there's a lot of really cool things here. 40-minute making of documentary. This is actually one of the better Kino Lorber releases, just because of special features involving with this one. But this is a film that is just super experimental, kind of goes along with the creativity aspect of Loving Vincent a little bit, and I love the camera techniques. It really kind of reminds me of something that would be wintry, I guess, and so that's why I chose this film, and I think you would enjoy this as well. It's a really, really great film. It'll put a big smile on your face as well, and it also might make you cry. So check out the last Laugh. I hope everyone can see that one someday. So let's actually move on from here to another film that really doesn't have much association with winter. Now we're moving on to one of my favorite anthology films of all time. From 1990, this is by one of the best directors to ever live. It's one of the better Japanese directors, and a lot of people already know this. It's Akira Kurosawa, and I'm talking about Dreams. So this is the last thing that he did before he passed away. And this is something I've talked about in the past as one of my favorite Criterion releases, and I don't know, something about this movie is just super magical. It's all about, dreams and your imagination and being creative, and there's some really harrowing things that are going on this. There's really happy things, some really strange things. That's what dreams are all about, is just, you have some good ones, you have some nightmares, you have some really things that you can regret in life, or some scenarios that are super bizarre and don't make any sense, that somehow are connected to something going on in your life at the time. And Dreams is just a really great film from Kurosawa. It's super creative. And so once again, kind of going along the lines of thinking of creativity and thinking about like things that might make you happy during a snow day, I would pick Dreams, and I would definitely watch this one, because it's such a wonderful film, and it has the full array of emotions that you want to get throughout your day, and it really just kind of speaks to the human experience. So check out Dreams if you haven't seen this. This is the Criterion edition of this film. It's wonderful, and it's uniquely Japanese as well. All right, so the last film that I want to talk about is one that literally just puts the biggest smile on my face, and I have a great time every time I've seen it. And I've seen it like 3 times now, and I almost want to watch it again. I might, when I turn this camera off, skip Jeremiah Johnson and watch this. I'm talking about Paddington 2. This series is just so fantastic. So I never grew up with Paddington Bear. I grew up with Winnie the Pooh, and I really, because this is more of a UK-based thing, where I think Winnie the Pooh maybe hit the United States a little bit heavier, even though that's also outside the United Kingdom. But Paddington 2, oh my God, this is such a great movie. And yeah, there are some elements of this movie that happen during maybe like a Christmas, wintry time period. But it's something about the bright colors, the acting, just the scenery, the joy of what's going on in the situation, and I guess for this particular one, Hugh Grant's a villain, and he's just trying to, oust Paddington Bear. But it's just a fun one. It's a fun film, and I wanted to definitely put a fun film on this list, a film that you can just shut your mind off and just enjoy every second of the ride, and kind of escape away from the idea of like you're getting snowed in, right? And so I wanted to put in one of the happiest films I've ever seen, and that's Paddington 2, and I love this movie to death. I really want Paddington 3 to happen. Make it happen. Come on, seriously. But yeah, that's all I have for my 10 recommendations. I even mentioned a few other films, but I want to know what your recommendations would be for a day like this where you're snowed in and you don't know what to do, and you can watch something that can make you happy, make you feel more isolated, I suppose, or any array of emotions, creative, anything that you want. Let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. Give it a like, share, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you next time. I'm not jonesing around.